Not every aquarium build goes exactly to plan, and in this video, I'm going to show you one of those aquariums. I'll be experimenting with some plants that I haven't used before, and I'm going to try to turn this pretty little clover-like plant known as hydrocotle tripartita into a carpeting plant in this low-tech, non-CO2 aquarium. I'm going to build a nano tree, which will turn into a nice little home for a group of blue dream shrimp. I'll show you the build from start to finish and how the aquarium evolves over the first 63 days. I'm Lucas, and welcome to Terracotta Aquarium. Strap in, because this build is a little bit of a roller coaster. The tank that I'm using for this build is a 5-gallon aquarium from an Imaginarium kit. You can find these kits at your local PetSmart, and they're a pretty good deal. They come with a filter and a light, but I've upgraded the light to a 15-watt LED spotlight from Hero Aquatics. I find it to be a great option for nano tanks like this one. The filter is a little worse for wear, so I'll likely upgrade it later on. Let's get started on the scape. I've got a piece of spiderwood and a smaller piece of bogwood, along with a few small dragonstones that I plan to use for the hardscape. And in my plant storage tank, I've got a great selection of stems and epiphytes to choose from. I'll be using a few different types of substrates, some fancy sand, and scatter gravel. I started the substrate with a layer of Seachem fluorite. This is a larger grained product that is packed full of nutrients. It makes for a great base layer because it lets water move through it easily, and this will help prevent any compaction in the long term. It's a little bit expensive though, and you could easily replace this with any kind of gravel. I'm using it because I've got some extra on hand, and it will bump up the nutrients in the substrate. I pushed it towards the back of the aquarium to create a slope. This will increase the sense of depth in the scape. On top of this, I tossed in some aqua soil. I'm using UNS Contra soil, but any aqua soil would work. I've used this soil in a few other tanks recently, and so far I really like it. It releases a lot less ammonia in the startup phase than some other aqua soils. I'll cap the soil off with some sand later, but first I wanted to get started on the hardscape. My goal is to create a nano tree with some dragonstones around the base and branches reaching out of the aquarium. These two pieces of wood have a sort of natural join, and together they really bring my vision of a tiny tree to life. I added in the pieces of dragonstone to get a feel for how the scape would look. I was happy with it, so I decided to glue the structure together. I used cotton pads and liquid superglue to fuse the pieces of wood, and I glued them to the largest dragonstone to make sure that they wouldn't float. I balled up a small amount of cotton pad, wedged it in a tight contact point, and soaked it with the liquid superglue. Having a precision tip for your superglue helps to get into those hard to reach places. When cyanoacrylate superglue dries, it is totally aquarium safe. Once the tree was dry, I removed the whole piece from the aquarium because I wanted to add some moss. I decided to use Christmas moss because I've got this big tub left over from other projects. I broke off a few small pieces from it, laid it on the wood, and then secured it by wrapping the branches with black thread. In a couple places where wrapping wasn't possible, I used a gel-formed superglue instead. I didn't go too crazy with the moss, just a few patches. As I was attaching it, I tried to think about where the light would be hitting the branches. If you can imagine where the light will hit the hardscape and place the moss in those areas, the whole thing will look a little bit more natural. I put the tree back into the aquarium and then got ready to add some sand. To start, I tossed a little bit on the cotton pads so that they wouldn't stand out as much. Then I started covering the substrate with sand. This is Congo sand from Landon. I haven't used it before, but it's a black sand that has sort of a reddish tone to it. It has a pretty interesting look, and I like it because it's quite a bit different from a more classic sand tone. It should make for a lot of contrast when we start adding some plants. I added back in the smaller dragonstones, and then tossed in some scatter gravel. I used mixed sizes and tossed it all over the place, but tried to keep some bigger piles around the dragonstones. I didn't want to totally cover up the sand, but add just enough gravel to create some interesting contrast. When the scatter gravel gets wet, the color will tone down quite a bit. I honestly kind of like the look of the tree already, and I felt like I could be done here. But I figured adding a few plants couldn't hurt. I started with some Anubias. I had two varieties that I wanted to use, Coin Leaf and Lanceolata. They should make for an awesome centerpiece in the tank. I placed the Coin Leaf and one of the Lanceolata in the gap between the Dragonstone and the wood, kind of at the base of the tree, and then wedged the last piece just above the other two. I think their big leaves really add to that foresty look that I'm going for. Next, I started adding the hydrocotle tripartita, and this plant is a big part of the build, because I want to see if I can turn this into a carpeting plant. This stuff grows so quickly that I think if I keep it planted into the substrate and do a little trimming to keep it low, I should have a nice lush carpet of it in the foreground. We'll see later in the video if this ends up panning out. After planting the hydrocotle, I got some stems ready. I had 2 bunches of Limnophila sessiflora and 2 alternanthera. I started with the alternanthera. I dug a small hole and I planted the entire bunch, one on each side of the tank. I hope that this plant keeps its vibrant red color. I think it's beautiful, but I've never kept it before, so I'm not sure how it will do. I like getting plants that I haven't grown before, just to get a gauge of how and if they will grow in my water. Behind the alternanthera, I planted both bunches of the Limnophila. Looking at the tank with all of the planting done, I think it looks great. There is a ton of contrast between the colors of the plants, the tree, and the darker sand. Let's fill it up. I moved it back onto its shelf and used a 5-gallon bucket and a cheap pump from Amazon to slowly fill the tank with water. I added some water conditioner and beneficial bacteria as the tank was filling. This will start the cycling process. I used a paper towel to diffuse the water and prevent it from stirring up the plants or the substrate. When the tank was full, I adjusted the plants a little bit and then got the filter started. So far, I'm really happy with the scape. I can't wait for the tank to cycle and to add some shrimp. Let's check back in a month and see how things are going. A month into the development of this tank, I ran into some serious problems with the plants. The aquarium was looking like this, and as you can see, it was in dire need of a maintenance session. Unfortunately, the alternanthera didn't do very well. This plant was an experiment for me, and it just didn't do well in this tank. I'm not surprised though. It's a pretty high demand plant and doesn't do as well in low-tech setups. The Anubias coin leaf also started rotting, which is really unfortunate. It's important to inspect this plant at whichever shop that you buy it from, because if the rhizome is starting to rot, Anubias plants are done for. Unfortunately, I missed this rot when I bought the plants, and it slowly wilted away. I also found that the Limnophila was struggling. Most of the stems had rotted away about halfway up the stem. This was a little bit surprising, as this plant usually grows well for me. I decided to clear out all of the alternanthera and the Limnophila. I figured I would just embrace this and lean more into the hydrocotle tripartita, which was totally thriving. It's actually started to carpet really well, and it seems like it's working as a low-tech carpeting plant, which is very exciting. I added a couple more cuttings of it to the back of the tank. I also added a small shrimp rock, which is basically a calcium and magnesium stone, to the back of the tank. This is just there to provide good minerals for the blue dream shrimp that I added about a week prior to the maintenance session. I added in a group of 5, which so far are doing really well. I like to start with a small group of shrimp in tanks this size so that I can watch their colony grow. After adding the shrimp and clearing out all of the struggling plants, I actually really like the more open and minimalist look of the aquarium. It's more focused on the Anubias centerpiece, the hardscape, and the carpeting hydrocotle tripartita. It also makes it much easier to see the shrimp. Let's check in another month and see how the tank evolves. Another month has passed, and this is what the tank looks like. I've really enjoyed watching the hydrocotle tripartita continue to grow and carpet. In some places, it's starting to grow like a stem plant, and in other places it's shooting out runners. It's such an interesting plant, and I really enjoy how much detail it adds to the scape. There's a little bit of hair algae in places, but as the hydrocotle grows, it's been fading away. I also like to let green spot algae grow on the walls and shrimp tanks, because it provides a natural food source for the shrimp. I really only bother cleaning the front of the glass. The shrimp are doing well, and I'm just starting to see the first buried shrimp, so I can tell that the colony is about to explode in size, which is really exciting. I've also switched up the filter to a sponge filter. I've been finding that sponge filters are really beneficial for shrimp. They basically provide a whole bunch of surface area for biofilm to grow, and collect lots of debris from the aquarium that the shrimp love to snack on. You may also have noticed that I moved this aquarium a couple of times while filming the video. I just set up this nano rack in the back of my studio, and I really enjoy that I've got my nano tanks set up on a shelf that's at eye level. It makes it really easy to watch the shrimp and to really enjoy them. I thought about adding some fresh stems to the background of the aquarium, but I decided against it. I prefer the minimalist look of the central tree, the Anubias focal point, and the growing carpet of hydrocotle tripartita. This build didn't go exactly to plan, but I still ended up with an aquarium that I'm really happy with. It's unfortunate that the Alternanthera and the Limnophila didn't work out, but I think that experimentation is really important in this hobby. And for me, that's a big part of what makes it fun. Learning what works and what doesn't work for you and in your water parameters helps to guide you to the things that do work for you, and ultimately, what can bring you the most joy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you want to see what I'm working on next, make sure that you're subscribed. If you want to see me set up another aquarium, you can check out this video right here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.